don't know if you saw the images, but it was the first physically distance gathering, I would imagine, between heads of state there. And then you had Prince Charles, the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, and Emmanuel Macron with very, very warm words for the City of London.
Yes, because there is that enduring partnership. I think this is the moment to also say that I am myself a Franco-British co-production. So I am only too painfully aware sometimes that you were quite right to ask Rob there. The two countries France and Britain, sometimes butt heads. They're two former colonial powers with former empires. They both have permanent seats on the UN Security Council. They have been in wars together, not just back in 1940, but of course many times since. But they've also had equally military clashes. But the defence, on the defence level, for example, there is great cooperation that we don't often get to talk about. But today, a highly significant day, because building on that historical past, and I thought it was very interesting, actually, that Prince Charles, who's not a head of state, the head of this country, the head of state is his mother, the Queen, but she's in lockdown, so he's representing her. But of course he will one day be the head of state of the United Kingdom. There he was socially distanced from a country's president. Prince Charles, very francophile, speaking French as we saw, not just reading it, but speaking it, as indeed does his mother. It was the diplomatic language. So it's interesting because it will echo, I think, many things that the Prime Minister shortly will be saying also to the French President about those historical, geopolitical, economic, cultural links, and that there is so much more to celebrate. But of course, it is a tricky time, even in that bilateral relationship, and that's why today is also very important. That sentence that Prince Charles talked about when he referred to the current challenges, that is something that Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, also released a statement about last night, and saying that in the same way that Britain and France have been side by side when it matters in the past, they will be and are currently. So that the royal part and the Legion of Honour to France are very important to mark that historical, fundamental, crucial link between the two countries. In this pandemic, let's see what happens about possible easing of lockdown, and also possibly our peoples going from one country to the other, possibly for a little bit of a break and a holiday. And above and beyond that, of course, Brexit will be mentioned. I think we're about to see the French president just come down the Mall. He is going to leave very shortly, Prince Charles, once he has visited, actually, just behind me, the offices that were the QG, the headquarters of the Free French, and the offices of General de Gaulle. Interesting that the 18th of June is deeply important, very significant in France, not as well known here, but days like today will be able to help younger and remind older people of that significance. But we're going to move now to the political important future between the British Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, who hasn't seen face-to-face and will be socially distanced, the French President, Emmanuel Macron, in a very long time.
Indeed, it's unlikely that they'll be shaking hands and still be doing the hand gestures and namaste. Let's talk about that meeting, which is going to take place, Benedicte, because, Brexit, it has been a turning point in the relationship between France and Britain. Clearly, things soured after that, and then France was playing hardball during the negotiations. What's going to be on the agenda once Emmanuel Macron sits down with Boris Johnson?
Well, the first thing that will happen is, again, that historical link, because Boris Johnson is a very, very big fan, admirer of his illustrious predecessor, Winston Churchill, indeed wrote a book about Winston Churchill, and I think would very much, in many ways, like to be compared to Winston Churchill. That is for others to decide in the future. Once that the Prime Minister has shown, the UK Prime Minister has shown artefacts of Charles de Gaulle and Winston Churchill, it will then move on to the more political and geopolitical things. So, of course, Brexit will no doubt be evoked, but the pandemic and the fact that what can happen, and if there can be now some freeing up early July of French people being able to come to the United Kingdom. Tourism, of course, is way down here. Aviation has been reduced by 97% here in this country. The economic pain that is going to come down the track here in the United Kingdom, let alone if you add, and people are concerned about that Brexit, and some think possibly a no-deal Brexit. So the negotiations aren't over, but today is not about actual negotiations, because the person conducting the EU negotiations is Michel Barnier. And so, of course, every leader in the EU feeds into that positioning, but no doubt Boris Johnson will be reaffirming certain things. And so, yes, Brexit will come up. But there'll be international issues like Iran, like Syria, like China, other very important, and counter-terrorism, of course, and terrorism, very important challenges that both Britain and France face. And there'll be the economic challenges. And, is there something that can be helped there as well? And what happens on the 1st of January 2021. So a lot to discuss, not much time. The weather has slightly improved, some sunshine on its way here.
I was just going to say, you don't have your umbrella anymore, so that's a good thing.
Between them. No, it is. And I will just make a quick remark about masks. Very significant, I personally think, that the French president, weeks ago, over a month ago, very publicly wore a face mask, a face covering. This is something that, unlike the French president, Boris Johnson almost died from COVID-19. He has never been publicly seen, as indeed President Trump has, been wearing a mask. And I think it's quite interesting because it's only in the last week that it has been obligatory here in the United Kingdom to wear a face covering on public transport. So there are some cultural and political differences. That's one of them. On the 18th of June, 2020, remembering the 18th of June, 1940, les Français parlent aux Français, the French speak to the French. Ici Londres, signing off for this particular live. This is London, handing back to you, Paris.
Benedicte, thank you very much for that. Benedicte Paviot reporting there from London.